Hey, we want to welcome everyone to the Talent Continuity, Creating a Recruiting Culture. Today, we're going to talk about how you create a recruiting culture. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I'm Cody Horton, and I'm really excited to have my good friend Chris Bell here. I've spent the last couple of decades working for companies working on diversity recruiting and diversity sourcing, and it's been amazing to have people in my background like Chris, who is probably one of the most talented and capable talent acquisition thought leaders that I've worked with over the years. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, well, first of all, man, you're too kind. Really appreciate that intro. Yeah, so I've been in talent acquisition. I'm in my 20th year, and started out agency recruiting years ago, and it was an exciting time. Right after the dot-com bubble and all of that stuff, and from there, I ended up moving into corporate recruiting where I fell in love with just all of the complexity that exists with inside of organizations. So we think about recruiting, and a lot of people think it's just about filling roles, but I quickly discovered that recruiting actually is a far complex role than we typically think it is. And so I, stayed incorporated. Eventually landed at Microsoft in a full-time role. Funny thing is, the first place I met Cody was actually as a contractor at Microsoft on a vendor role. Landed on a team besides Cody that it was just not a good fit at all. And I ended up leaving and going to T-Mobile, and Microsoft recruited me back to a full-time job. And I've been here ever since. Have worked various roles, probably had 5 or 6 different job titles inside of Microsoft within HR. And today I am a senior manager leading an executive recruiting team for the go-to-market businesses for the US and North America.
Well, I know you've got an amazing background, a lot of humility, certainly there. Chris, I want to thank you for joining. And I know over the years we've talked about this recruiting culture, and I'm really thrilled to be able to have this webinar with you and have you share some great information. Before we get started, I always like to share a quote, and this one was one from Mahatma Gandhi. In a gentle way, you can shake the world. And that really fits what we're talking about today. If you have an organization that is in a position to recruit and hire and get people into roles that change their lives, that's a first step in changing the world. And we just have to know our role, and we can all play a part in making that difference. So today we're going to talk about what is a recruiting culture, what are the benefits, and why would you even want to have a recruiting culture, and how do you build a recruiting culture? And Chris is going to share some great insight on strategic talent scouting. And then we're going to share a few more items and certainly be open to questions. We'll also take questions along the way. So put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll tackle those as we go through. And we'll also have some time at the end to cover additional questions. So what is a recruiting culture? One of the things that I know is that talent is the lifeblood of any organization. With the right people, companies can do amazing things, and they are doing some amazing things. There is no one size fits all for a recruiting culture. So we'll talk a little bit about, what a recruiting culture is and what it's not. And, it's certainly a leader-led, collaborative, company-wide effort where every employee can get involved in the recruiting process. It's not just a recruiter serviced, order taking and siloed effort. Recruiting culture means your entire workforce is involved and has some responsibility for the recruiting service.
Great, that's a great point, Cody. Yeah. So, and it's interesting. It's really important to distinguish here that we're not talking about like the formal recruiting process, right? We're really talking about being brand ambassadors for the company, right? Everybody having a part in actually telling that story.
Yeah, And so some of the benefits of a recruiting culture and why you would even get involved in a recruiting culture is it enables retention by allowing you to give people the opportunity to be successful in your company. Uh, it gives us the ability to tell the company's story and to talk about the things that are successful from a career perspective for employees, but also from a business perspective where your employees are able to go out and tell the story about their own success, about the company's success, about the impact that you're having on your customers and on your candidates and on the world in general. It also increases engagement. When you have a recruiting culture, everyone feels responsible, they feel involved, they are engaged, and they help you move forward toward the vision and mission of your organization. And a recruiting culture has tremendous potential for impacting the success of your employees as well as your business. And it certainly increases your ability to ensure scalability. You take the focus off of a single recruiting team, or in some cases, a single recruiter, and you spread that responsibility across your organization to have that impact. And Chris, I know you've seen this at scale being with your company.
Yeah. I think the scalability piece is huge, especially when you have those shifts in hiring where everyone needs to pitch in. Say you have a project you need to hire, and I'm speaking at a scale of Microsoft. You need 500 cloud solution architects over the next 6 months, right? And so, how do you do that? Thinking about the time it would take to actually achieve that with your current workforce, knowing that your current recruiting team in this area is probably going to hire, 25 to 30 people a month, right? So how do you achieve those economies of scale with more? And it's really about actually increasing the amount of recruiters within your company, right? And so recruiting culture definitely helps with that. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into more of that, Cody.
So how do you build a recruiting culture? We'll jump in and start talking about this. Some of the things that you want to do is the first thing you want to do is you want to start internally. Start with your team and increase that capability within your organization and get people really buying into the fact that hiring and recruiting is everyone's responsibility. So you want to be able to take advantage of getting your employees engaged, really get them understanding their roles in the whole recruiting process. A lot of times you hear people use sports analogies about teams. One of the things that I thought about is when you get an organization that when they're producing a movie or they're producing a play, you have actors, you have the supporting cast, everyone knows what their role is, and they're all focused on really in getting that movie out or getting that play produced. That's what happens when you get your employees involved in recruiting from a perspective that they all know what their jobs are, and you just have to empower them. Having that focus internally on your commitment to diversity and inclusion, and you'll hear people talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. Those are a lot of the components that actually help people become more focused and really get a emotional connection to what your vision and your mission are.
Hey, Cody.
Go ahead.
So as you're talking here, the thing that's popping into my head, really thinking about this engagement and commitment to D&I, a lot of the times we have this, and I'm sure everyone on the call has heard of the push or pull, right? And typically what we see HR pushing a lot, right? Pushing engagement, pushing D&I initiatives and things like that. If we start like with the second slide, I believe talked about what it is, and it is leader led. So thinking about from the CEO on down, the CEO, their directs, and so on. If we model that behavior at the highest level, and then it trickles down into the organization, that's the only way you can really get to a recruiting culture and this type of engagement and commitment to D&I.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Chris. And you've seen this over the years, even some of the things around career development. Are people able to go out and tell a good story and tell your company's story? And more importantly, can they tell their story to other people to help them really attract people and attract talent to the organization? You've had a successful career at Microsoft, so what are some of the key things that you would highlight when it comes to what's kept you there and what's kept other people there with some of the long tenured people that you have in the company?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I actually created this module, and it became part of our GTA, Global Talent Acquisition Organization training. It was all around storytelling, and thinking about how we actually talk to candidates about the work that we do. And not only that, how we talk to other people inside of the organization who are aspiring to get the certain roles. It always needs to start with your story. Right. And so for me, I've had the opportunity, I've been blessed with the opportunity to do a lot of different things inside of Microsoft. And so for me, it always starts with why I'm here. Right. And the platform that Microsoft has given me. And so I think, you have to actually get to a place to where you have these type of stories that you can connect with somebody. And the goal is really to create that emotional connection. And at the end of the day, if they can see themselves as the hero in your story, then you're doing your job, right? If they can see, wow, this person actually came in at this level and now they're a VP in the company, that's super interesting, right? I can do that, right? Why couldn't I do that? Right. So it's really about those aspirational thoughts and being able to share that vision with them so they can put themselves in that place and want to aspire for the same thing.
Yeah, and Chris, I know the culture at Microsoft has evolved over the years. You and I were back in the day when it was all about the deepest technical skills you could ever have, right? About some of the tricky questions that you could ask when you're talking to candidates. When you really think about how things have evolved, and even when I look at how companies are evolving, they're really evolving to look at what are the values and behaviors that we care about? What are the things that we can do that are people focused and not so much product and technology focused and product and technology centric? And so
Absolutely. No,
getting
that's a
that.
great point, Cody. I think one of our big things that we're doing, it's about screening in, right? So we screen in, meaning that we want to find smart and capable people, strongly emotional, intelligent people, bring them into the company, put some rich set of on the job experiences in front of them, because research shows that people develop the best and the fastest when they actually have a rich set of on the job experiences. So what does that mean? That means that we can actually, instead of having requirements that screen out, we can actually screen in a bit more. What does this do? This increases our ability to attract diversity, right? There's so many things that it opens up. And so we're looking at best in class talent based on potential, right? And so pouring in those set of experiences, the goal, one of the things, everybody at Microsoft is a leader, right? So we want a company of 150,000 leaders. And so really we have that mindset around every person that comes into the company. How do we put these rich set of experiences into them and allow them to lead in their space?
Yeah, and what you're talking about really helps retain people and keep them in the organization and keep them growing. And we touched a little bit on career development, but there are also career opportunities. And part of having a recruiting culture, a lot of times when you don't have that recruiting culture, one of the first things you do is you go for that external talent. Can we go hire this person externally in order to make your organization more focused and be that recruiting culture? You want to make sure your internal employees know about all the opportunities. How do you post those roles internally? How do you make sure people understand what growth looks like? You certainly are going to go externally with talent as well and have your whole workforce do that. And one of the ways to get there is educating your employees, not only on what exists today internally, but what may be coming up. And how do they actually go out and make the connections and network and always be recruiting, even before they know a job is open. If you can get them to go out and talk about their good deal in the company, that is a huge win for any company building a recruiting culture.
You're absolutely right. I think that the key, the thing that actually prohibits this the most, Cody, is that most organizations really they're kind of siloed with the way they think about the talent. My talent is my talent, and I'm not sharing my talent out. But if you think about an organization that's really trying to win, they're going to focus on making sure that the right talent is aligned to the right opportunities within the company. Right. So that's internal movement, a freely internal movement type system that allows you to take advantage of the best skills and align them with the desires of the people that are actually that have those skills and put those things together. We have so many good talent scenarios where we have great people that are sitting in roles that they're not operating at the highest level of impact. So how do you actually find that highest level of impact and share talent across borders, right? I think that's huge, and that really promotes retaining talent. So that's one of the things, when we think about developing and retaining, that's key to it is having an open market inside of your company.
Yeah, and I know, Chris, you're involved in hiring. You certainly are hired at all levels in the company today. You're involved in hiring at the highest levels. We got a treat today because I know you're going to share some things, some tips that people can take just that will help them get to the point that they're able to go out and proactively find talent before you ever have a role. And so I know the talent scouting is an area that you've looked at that you can really get people involved at the leadership level. And I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about like the slide that you have up, Cody, it's an interesting one, right? Because when we think about what we try to do to drive a recruiting culture, with my team and in the organization, and look, this is the thing, every organization at Microsoft does not have a recruiting culture, right? Meaning that it is still a work in progress. My team does a great job driving it with the marketing organization, the U.S. sales organization, and in some other areas that we actually focus on, like HR and so on. However, that's not it's not done in everywhere else. There's still things that we do, and so we leverage talent scouting, we leverage external succession planning, and our active sourcing on search work, right? So that would be more of the reactive stuff that comes up. And we try to make that less reactive by doing the work of talent scouting and having our leaders engage in talent scouting and succession planning a lot earlier in the process before we even know we have a role.
Yeah, and I know that you've got a big recruiting team there at Microsoft, and every person's work is certainly going to be valuable. What's really powerful is how you've taken this talent scouting effort and really created a process and some procedures and some steps and just some engagement that helps get people to the table before you ever have the open opportunity.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's dive into it. So what is talent scouting? And basically it's proactive. It's a proactive approach to recruiting. It is not about recruiting for a role. It's about engaging talent. At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's about proactively engaging talent. And what I like to call it, because we focus talent scouting primarily on diversity, but it can be used all across. And we're always keeping an eye out for great talent. But it's a long-term approach. And what that means is these engagements can be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, sometimes 4 years or more, to where we are courting a candidate, facilitating the building of a relationship with one of our leaders. And then eventually, when the position opens up, we actually have a slate that's ready to go. Because we actually talked to a lot of talent along this time frame. The leader is meeting with several prospects a year, multiple times over dinner, when they're traveling, whatever it may be, just conversations, you name it. They're doing this. And this is something that we facilitate. So it really helps us think about, how do we manage our long-term pipelines, right? So everybody has a huge talent pool, right? But really at the end of the day, your business wants to know, what does the pipeline look like for my sales leaders? What does the pipeline look like for this? And being able to have that question and understand truly what it looks like and how you measure it, that's what talent scouting allows us to do. As we get into this, we actually have stages that we use to measure talent scouting and what it actually is. And so we'll talk about those a little bit more. Great. So these are kind of like the commitments from each area. When we think about like our stakeholders, we basically have them meeting with people, 1 to 2 times a month, and that's the commitment. And so as you can see, you have several candidates going through this with multiple leaders. You actually get to know a lot of talent out there. So we facilitate these get to know conversations. And if you think about this time during the pandemic, a lot of teams are trying to figure out, what do I do right now because my rec load has stopped? We're on a hiring freeze. How can I continue to keep the wheels churning in order to make sure that we're not behind when it's time to hire again? Talent scouting is a great process for that. So we're talking about engaging talent proactively, getting them in front of the leaders, making sure that your leaders are actually prepped. They understand how to hold a conversation without talking about a specific role. They understand how to actually start building relationship and leaving it open for the next engagement, right? And creating action steps about what should happen next with this person, and taking a look broadly across the organization to understand exactly where this person could potentially fit within the organization so we can identify the appropriate next steps. The key is not just to have them meet with one leader, because everybody knows that leader could attrit, and the next thing you know, you're starting from scratch again, right? So the goal, how we move people through the engagement stages, which we'll talk about in the next slide, but it's discover, know, like, trust. Our goal is to get everybody to trust. So the more people we have them meet with, the more they trust us, want to be at Microsoft, the more people will trust them and want them to be at Microsoft. So that's the goal, to get everyone to that stage.
One of the things that came up is, how do you get the leaders to be involved in, even in this whole recruiting effort, right? We talked about it has to be leader led. How do you take someone who's got a really busy schedule and get them to commit to doing this?
Hey, that's a great question. And that's probably the one of the toughest things to do. When we think about how to make that happen, it's really about showing the value prop of why they should be doing this, right? So for instance, we have what we call a leader walking deck. On that leader walking deck, we go into a business with a leader. We have the HR business partner who's already on board. They understand why we're doing this. We think about the talent gaps within the organization. Those are things that we bring in the talent management for, and we try to understand those things. The other piece of it, we couple it with external succession planning. So now we think about a leader and their directs, and we say, looking at your directs and your internal succession plan, your slate is really weak here. We probably need to shore it up with external talent. In order to make that external succession plan something real that we could activate if this person did leave the company, we need to actually have conversations with these people. So we start presenting the value of actually having these discussions and why they should do it. And sometimes it can be, you don't actually have a person with this caliber of technology understanding in this new space that's developing in your organization. Maybe we should start meeting some of these people. For instance, we did that with IoT. IoT was really brand new, and it was like, gosh, who do we know in the IoT space? And this was before Microsoft was developing their IoT efforts. So we sought out all of the thought leaders in IoT, and we just started having leaders have discussions with them. And from there, we were able to, one, not only facilitate relationship building, but gain so much intelligence about what was going on in the market, who were the key players, and so on. So there's a lot of benefit to actually, getting leaders involved in that. I mean, for one, it's like the intel that you get is it's immensely valuable on its own. So I hope that answers that question. Happy to dive in more of that, but yeah, it's all about presenting the value proposition. And again, we have like a walking deck that takes a leader through everything that we want to get them on board with, and
Yeah,
even the coaching piece of it.
And I remember us talking, and the conversation came up where you're also gonna talk to those leaders in a language that they understand, right? What's going to be the impact, right? How is this going to impact the people? How is it going to impact the business? Is there an ROI on it? Those are things that are going to help them move forward. And now that I was thinking about this, I remember us having a little bit of a conversation about that. And I think that's really tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So these are the engagement stages. So discover, know, like, trust. And as you can see, each one of them kind of have a definition. Inside of our ATS system, we actually have these engagement stage set up to where when a profile actually goes into the system, they may go into the discover stage, depending on where they're at. They may be in the know. As we move them along, we're able to actually get them to like and trust. The key thing is the engagement piece, right? What kind of engagement are we actually driving? When we think about 360 reporting and the scorecard pieces of this is where I talk with my recruiting team about having certain percentages of people in know and moving that certain percentage to like, and so on to trust. On the client side, really it's about an engagement scorecard. This is where all of your leaders are, right? Being able to show them exactly how their directs are actually engaging with talent throughout the organization is huge. And it allows us to actually set some strategic goals around getting them to actually engage more with talent. And if it's top-down driven, they can actually see this because the leaders actually understand the benefits because we've been doing this for many, many years. It won't happen overnight, but it's one of those things you just have to be consistently driving with the leaders.
Yes, and I know that you've evolved this over the years. What stands out for me with this is people actually engage and buy from people that they know, they like, and they trust. And that's really, really powerful. And to your point, this didn't happen overnight. Looks like you've done some great work with this. What are your thoughts on a company that they're not as big, right? They may not have the resources of a Fortune 50 company. Any thoughts on, how do you do this in your small company, 100 people or 200 people?
Yeah, you can absolutely do this in a small company. I think it's about really identifying the gaps within the organization that you're trying to fill. And again, take this situation that we're in right now with the pandemic. Many of us were working on searches and they probably closed down, right? That doesn't mean you have to stop working on these searches. You continue to engage this talent, getting them in front of the leaders, not talking about a specific role, but really being able to start building that relationship and getting to that place to where they're trusting and you build that trust relationship with the candidates. It's scalable. It doesn't require a lot of actually overhead to get this done. It just requires a commitment for talent and for great talent. Right. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about building that recruiting culture. And it starts when it's leader led, when leaders are engaged and they understand the benefits of it, their directs will fall in line and they begin to do this. Right. And then when they believe in it and they see the results that they're getting from it, they're going to push that down and say, hey, you know what? I want everybody doing this in my organization. Right. And so that's how we've been able to approach it, regardless of the size of the organization.
Well, it definitely sounds like you've got a commitment to know the talent before you ever know about the opportunity. And that can be done at any level. It doesn't have to be at the executive level. So
absolutely.
Sounds like some great stuff here.
Yeah. And so, finally on the talent scouting thing, this is just, these are just some numbers from one of the organizations where we implemented talent scouting back in 2017. And just to show you kind of like where the diverse, and this is all diversity numbers, right? So not, this is just a percentage of diversities and the impact that talent scouting had on that organization. So in the first year, you know, through the regular hiring, I think there was, you know, there was 10% of diverse hires, but, you know, obviously a much smaller piece came from the talent scouting. And so this is what you got to understand. So it says rec hires. Those are the reactive ones. Somebody left a job and then they opened the rec. But the talent scouting hires, they were really opportunistic because these meetings were happening. And then the leader said, wow, this is great talent. I want to create a role for this person. Right. And so this was a tech organization where they actually have the leverage to do that. We can't do that too much on the GTM side, but on this tech organization, they met with talent, and over time they built relationships. And when the timing was right, whether they got headcount from finance or whatever, they created roles specifically for this talent that came into the organization. And that's one thing that when you think about a company that has a recruiting culture and a talent mindset, they are willing to secure talent in any way they can. You know, you think about a company like Amazon and, you know, can't stand the culture over there, but one of the things they get right is they will hire talent when they see talent. They don't have headcount caps, anything like that. They'll hire talent and they'll put them in a role, have them create something based on a white paper or something like that. But they are not shy about hiring talent, especially when it's the right thing to do for the business. And so that's what this is showing. The red is where we actually took the chance and we just hired people because they were great talent. And you can see, you know, FY18, 44% of the talent was diverse. And as we continue on, the diversity pipelining through talent scouting got greater and greater results in terms of the diverse talent that we were bringing into the organization. And by nature, the organization is a lot more diverse as well. So yeah,
Well,
that's it on that.
Well, that really underscores what you had talked about earlier when you said, you know, focus on screening the right people in, and not necessarily screening people out.
Right.
If you weren't looking for the right people and looking for that talent and trying to get them in, you might have missed some great hires in that effort.
It happens all the time, Cody. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give you the best example is like a lot of diverse talent, especially African-American talent, even Hispanic talent. They're deemed as not as technical as a lot of other talent. And I guarantee you, if you take the time to talk to them and actually screen in and get them in the right business, you know, it's opportunity waiting to be capitalized on. And a lot of businesses just kind of overlook it.
Yeah, and
maybe they don't have a comp sci degree. They have an information technology degree, right? There's opportunity there that isn't being captured.
Yeah, and I think that point, you know, kind of hits on this slide that we're covering now, is that not over prescribing it, right? Not over prescribing, hey, this person absolutely has to have a computer science degree to be hired, even though
Right.
they have the right behaviors and attributes. One of the things that looks like you've done with the talent scouting effort is you haven't over prescribed and over dictated or over engineered what it needs to look like. I think sometimes people want all the I's dotted and the T's crossed and all the steps to be perfectly engineered. And sometimes you just have to let it evolve based on the market.
Right. Yeah, you do. I mean, from a talent perspective, I mean, you can be very prescriptive in terms of the type of talent that you want to build in terms of that pipeline, right? In terms of the program, there's a lot of ways to you know, to actually get there. I think the best way is having a semi-programmatic rhythm to it, right? So making sure you have a rhythm with the leader, a constant sync, you making sure that they understand that they need to provide feedback, they understand the type of coaching they need. When you get really good at this program, the key is leveraging your ATS system, leveraging your engagement stages to allow you to have geo intelligence. So now, where we're at and where we're trying to really capitalize on, when our leaders can travel again, when they're traveling, we set meetings up for them, right? We understand, okay, who do we have at the like stage in Chicago that we need to have more intel on, more calibration, to get a leader to actually, figure out if we should be pursuing them to try to get the trust, right? So we can figure that out. Oh, you're going to Chicago, then you're going to London. Okay, who do we have across the globe in the no stage? Or who's in trust that we just need to keep warm and have them meet with somebody else, right? So we call that geo intelligence around the talent scouting. And that's one of the things we're trying to perfect today. Because what we were up against leaders would ping us and they say, hey, I'm going to the Bay Area in 2 weeks. Who do you have people for me to meet with? And we'd be scrambling. We have a buttload of people, but we couldn't think of people, right? It's like, crap, too late. I should have thought about this person, right? And so now our database is codified to where we can actually pull it up by geo and by engagement stage really quickly to get to that meeting list that they need to have.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point that you make there, and just knowing that talent so that you could actually say, hey, here's somebody you need to look out for. Wouldn't it be amazing if the leader already knew who that talent was because they had been engaged with them at whatever venue was there? Or
it happens, man, with our external succession planning. I mean, so like, this is the thing. Everybody talks about succession planning, internal. This is the funniest thing. Internal succession plans, usually the people that are on the plans, they have no clue that they're on the plans. What if they actually knew they were on the plans? How would that drive retention, right? I mean, that would be a huge retention piece to know that if this person leaves or they win the lotto or they're hit by a bus, I'm the next person up, right? But we don't tell them that half the time. We keep it under wraps, and then next thing you know, crap, they left to another job and we have no internal person now. And so on the external piece, we don't really mess with the internal. That's talent management. We know about it because we have to know where the hot areas are, where we need to shore it up from an external perspective. But the thing about the key thing is that it can't just be a list of names. It has to be real. So whether it's Chris Capicella, the CMO, or whether it's, Kate Johnson, the president of MSUS Sales, they understand who is on their external succession plan and they meet with them on a regular basis, right? So that's the key. Every year we have what's called talent talks, and we have to establish action plans around these external succession plans and the goal to continue to meet with them. So that's something that we do. The aspiration is to have every corporate vice president engaged with their external succession plan. I don't think we're quite there yet. We have a lot of work to do. That's what I'm driving my team to do. But that is, we're going in that direction.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. Another thing that you want to do in recruiting, building this recruiting culture is build a distributed and digitally enabled workplace, right? Do people have multiple channels to communicate both internally and externally, and to be able to share information and to be able to collaborate and to be able to talk about what their career looks like, how you get work done, how you solve problems. You don't want to be locked in. The current situation has forced companies to kind of cross the chasm and get better at using the distributed workplace. And it's not going to go back to the way it was. So the companies that embrace that digital workplace and they foster that digital workplace and they can communicate not only hiring, but also career opportunities, both internally and externally, will be in a competitive position for the positive. I think another thing with the recruiting culture, a lot of times companies they pay for employee referrals. They pay for individual achievement, which is there is a merit-based system where you're going to measure people against performance. Some of the things you want to align, especially in the recruiting culture, is align some of those awards to the overall company success with talent, not just
Absolutely.
an individual achievement. What
Absolutely.
are some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, Cody, I think it's the same. I mean, look, the biggest controversial topic is putting D&I um, commitments and tie that to performance review, right? I think the same would be kind of with recruiting too, because we have a lot of leaders at some point will get down back to they want to push recruiting off as a service that is there to serve them, right? When no, it's actually a partnership, and I think that's one of those things to where how do we think about the talent commitment? Most leaders typically have a talent commitment, but does it actually extend to a recruiting commitment, a commitment of actually updating your LinkedIn profile and being out there, a commitment to actually, meeting with talent, um, any opportunity you can, or at conferences or whatever it may be. It's sporadic behavior today, and it's not concrete inside of reviews. I think it is definitely an opportunity, but I don't know if you're going to get it widely adopted in most companies, right?
We are
I think it's an opportunity though.
it's baby
So
steps. It's baby steps, right?
yeah. Hey, so there was a question, what would the role of a recruiter be in the recruiting culture? And I just want to address that really quick. Uh, so the role of the recruiter in the recruiting culture is the same, right? So when we think about a recruiting culture, again, it's not about this formalized recruiting process. I mean, it's really talking about the culture has a talent mindset, right? They understand that attracting, developing, retaining talent are core expectations of all employees, right? So that means your manager is doing more to recruit you, to re-recruit you. Your manager is actually, when they are recruiting for a job, they are not just posting and praying. They're actually getting out there, networking on LinkedIn, doing whatever they can. They're ambassadors for the company and telling the company's story. Recruiting's job is still there, right? And you are still doing that. They are actually meeting with talent, and recruiting is facilitating that. We have this thing to where a lot of recruiters believe that their job is to be transactional, right? And so I'm telling you today, your job is not transactional. Your job is to be a consultant. And so what does that mean? That means that, hey, based on my conversations with your talent manager, your HR VP, and understanding that you just attrited in this area and you're missing this skill, this is a gap. I think we need to address it. And I have 5 people that I would like you to meet with. Right? I know you're not hiring for it today, but we need to be proactive about this. It'd be great for you to get to know them, right? So it's really about being a consultant and driving the agenda that you have, right? You can't snap to other HR's agenda, talent management's agenda. You have to snap to your own agenda when you're driving talent scouting, and then figure out how it informs these other agendas or vice versa, right? So that is key.
Yeah, and I have to echo that, Chris. I mean, the way I think about it, recruiting's job, recruiter is the architect, right, of the framework. So recruiters
Exactly.
control the framework, and they build the framework, and then all the other employees and leaders they actually help fill in the content. And if you've got everyone pulling in the same direction to get great talent, it's easier for the recruiter to be that consultant and to be that trusted advisor to help the organization, right? This isn't a recruiting culture does not mean you don't have a recruiting leader. It means, or recruiters, it means those recruiters and recruiting leaders are thinking more strategically about what does the brand look like? What do the messages look like? Where do we go, right? How do we architect this, and how do we get other people to go do the work and to pull it away from some of the transactional things that a recruiter, to your point earlier, is not an order taker. They're actually a partner collaborating and architecting the overall talent strategy at
Absolutely.
whatever level in the organization you need to do that at.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, it's like everybody has switched from the term recruiter to talent acquisition because, like I said in the beginning, I think there was a realization that recruiting is just a very small piece of what we do, right? There's so much more that we do. And so when we think about that picture of being an architect, that is the talent acquisition recruiter, our talent acquisition consultant's role, is to architect all of these different pieces that attract talent, whether it's the leader activating them, whether it's the social media campaigns, even allowing the leaders to understand how to be more active on social recruiting. All of those things, you are the architect and the kind of the orchestrator, conductor of all of these tools to attract talent, right? So recruiting has a significant role. We can't think of our job as so narrow. Our job is not narrow, but it is if we make it that way.
Well, it's like going back to the example of, if you're going to do a Broadway play or you're going to make a movie, the recruiter is directing all those stars and all the support folks that are going to make that happen, right? And so it's a great place to be as a recruiter. One of the last bullet on this slide is really, I think, the most powerful thing that an organization can do to build this recruiting culture is to give people freedom, responsibility, and accountability for successful talent wins, enabling that. So it's across the board, not just the recruiter. It's all the people. They know what their role are. They know how to go about getting things done. And they've got the freedom to innovate and do some of the things that are going to bring more talent to the company. It's not going to be all the same thing. Not everyone's going to be outreach and phone calls and doing all those things, but everyone's got a part, and they need to know their part, be responsible and accountable for it.
Absolutely. No, that's completely right. I think, there's companies out there. It was funny. We were competing with Facebook, and we were going back on this intense thing. We were trying to, there were all of these research people that were suddenly becoming available. And I'm calling down on this research guy from this University of Toronto or something like that. And I'm trying to get him to come to Microsoft. And the same guy that I'm calling he was being called by Mark Zuckerberg. It's like, who the hell do you think's going to win? Who do you think's going to win? Me or Mark Zuckerberg, right? So that's a recruiting culture, right? Where leaders are willing to jump into the process and help recruiting bring wins to the table, right? Understanding that, look, we're all owners in this company, right? Look, and that's it. When I go, it's like, I'm not subservient to you. I have just as much skin in the game as you getting this hire as you do, right? Because I'm a stock owner. The stock price is going to go up when we get this person, and we're both going to win, right? So let's partner on this to figure out the best way we can get this hire. You got go dues, and I got go dues. So there we go, right? So that's how we think about it. But recruiting culture, I mean, heck, man, it's like you can't compete when you get your leaders involved. Recruiters do not compete. They just can't compete. They can reach people that we can't reach, right? So why not leverage them?
Yeah, even if you think about the case where it's a developer to developer conversation or a project manager to a project manager conversation, that candidate is going to relate more to the person doing the job, and it's the recruiter's job to help the person who is a developer be a better recruiter
yes.
and know what to say.
Thank you. That is it.
And
There's a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
Modeling, coaching, that's all key. Recruiters role. That doesn't mean you're not going to be recruiting. You're still recruiting, right? Yeah. There's people that you can reach, and there's people that your leaders and your team can reach. So.
Well, another area, I know we're coming up on time, but, educating your workforce, this is a powerful thing. And so the question came up, what can a recruiter do, right? Recruiters have a lot of knowledge. They can work on focusing on training the interviewers, making sure people understand how to conduct a good interviewer. Give a tool, like an interviewer toolkit, where not only do the hiring teams understand how to conduct an interview, they understand how to prep for it and how to do all the things and what things not to do. Building a recruiting playbook. Like, nobody wants the recruiter's job, but a recruiting playbook could help people get better at the recruiting piece in that recruiting culture, and ensuring that interviewers know roles, right? Making sure that you do just some basic stuff that you as a recruiter are going to do automatically because it's your job. If we could make everyone get to that mindset where they're doing that, recruiters can ensure that there are diverse interviewers on those interview panels. Recruiters can facilitate the bias awareness training, implicit bias, and all the other things that might go into keeping you from hiring that best person because you didn't see the talent that was in front of you. And then recruiters in partnership with the PR team, the talent brand team, anyone else who's the marketing team, to do some social media training, not to make people experts at social media, but to help them get better at the messaging and the things that they do around social media. I know you've seen some of this in your efforts, Chris.
Yeah, it's interesting, Cody, just kind of looking at this list and everything. I think these are all definitely things that we want to do to prepare like interview teams, for sure, right? We definitely want to do that. The bias awareness training is interesting because if you think about what talent scouting, if you focus it on diversity and getting leaders introduced to diverse talent, that is a direct hit on tearing down biases. Right? They're talking to people that don't look like them. They're getting to learn and to understand, and understanding helps tear down biases. I mean, there's still room for unconscious, but however, once you have that understanding, once they know, it becomes a lot more, they become a lot more open to things. The reason when we think about this iteration of talent scouting, and when I think about, before it was called talent scouting, we called it RMP, Relationship Management Program 2.0, and it was focused on diversity. The first iteration, 1.0, was only focused on technical luminaries, but then we shifted it to diversity and we decided it to be more a part of the facilitation. And the reason we did that was because Steve Ballmer had lost several diverse executives. And during the exit interviews that I conducted with them, the thing that they said, they never felt like they were a part of Steve Ballmer's circle. So in order to actually get into that circle, it popped into my head that we need to expand his circle. We need to expand his circle from just people that look like him or people that he went to school with or whatever it may be. Let's put diverse talent in his circle to tear down some of these biases, to bring a different level of awareness to talent out there that may not look like him. And that's where we really we started getting significant traction when we started expanding the networks of our executives. And really, at the end of the day, that's what talent scouting is. It's expanding the networks of our executives. So when they're ready to hire, they have more options.
Great. No, that's awesome. So here's some of the things that people can do. We can certainly go into more detail on this. I know we're coming up on time, but I wanted to see, Jeff, do we have any other questions? Let me just look and see. So I see a question here from Brooke that says, how would you measure your success in being a recruiting culture, and once established, train others to participate? Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's all about recruiting. We're all about measuring. So some of the things that if you look holistically at the recruiting culture, the way you're going to measure your success is going to be a couple of ways. One certainly is going to be on the hiring side. That's the easier part. The other thing is going to be on, are you retaining people, right? Are you still recruiting internal people to still love and want to be part of the company and part of the mission? So looking at the retention, looking at what your brand is, are people engaging and interacting with your brand? What are some of the other, what's your internal engagement? Some of the tools are already in place, right? Most companies have an employee engagement survey that they do. You can look at promotion rates. You can look at internal movement rates. Those are all metrics that you would look at that already exist, that you don't have to go create something new to understand kind of how you're doing. And you can do it on both the recruiting side, the hiring side, looking at those numbers, conversion rates, how many people are converting from either a college recruiting program or from your outreach, and then retention rate, how many people are retained, and even the boomerang rate. The boomerang is where someone leaves a company and they come back. So how do you look at numbers like that? Man, it was a great place. I want to be back there, because I think retention starts with recruiting. And Chris, I don't know what your thoughts are.
The way I would answer that question, how do we measure the success of a recruiting culture? And I'll just share with you how we measure it today. We measure it by engagement. How many people are in our pipeline that we know that we would hire today if we had the right job, right? How many of our execs are engaged in the talent scouting process? Meaning, if they're engaged, then they understand and they've been trained and they have been coached around recruiting and developing relationships. Those are huge things. All of that, and this is the thing to keep in mind. Talent scouting is not a reactive approach. It's a proactive approach, and it's a long-term strategy. This is not to be won in 3 months. It's even not to be won in 6 months, right? This is the thing that if you are trying to shore up your talent in the long term for the future, this is the type of thing that the whole organization adopts. And eventually you start seeing the talent scouting hires come in, and you see the impact of those hires. But it's not something that if you're thinking in a reactive mindset, it's not going to work for you. It's really a long-term approach.
Yep. No, I think it's a great point, Chris. Well said. I really want to thank you for joining today and sharing such great insight. Want to thank everybody everybody for being here and showing up and participating. And certainly, if you have any questions or anything you need, definitely reach out to Chris or I, and we'll make sure our contact information is available. Before we end, I want to just check, Jeff, do we have any other questions?
No, we're good.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Take care.